Some storms don't start with thunder, they begin in silence. Harrison Ford had seen injustice before, but on Flight 1790, it didn't come with shouting. It came with a smile, and the moment he heard it, he knew. Knew this wasn't just about a seat, it was about something we keep failing to learn. What happened next would shake more than a cabin, it would break the sky. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, make sure to subscribe for more. Gate 22B always smelled the same: burnt espresso, cold steel, and the quiet entitlement of people who had never waited in line. The first-class passengers stood in silent formation, eyes flicking from phone screens to Rolexes, briefcases polished to a lawyer's sheen. Conversations floated above the crowd like perfume: mergers, Paris, equity splits. No one noticed the man in the black hoodie. He moved slowly, deliberately. His sneakers were worn but clean, his jeans loose, hands relaxed. In one, a folded boarding pass. In the other, a weathered paperback, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. He clutched it not like luggage, but like memory. No one clapped when he passed. No one nodded. In their eyes, he was just another older black man flying solo, maybe upgraded by miles, maybe someone's uncle. Harmless, unremarkable. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, a woman 3 places behind instinctively pulled her handbag closer. She didn't think twice about it, just muscle memory. Her eyes never met his. Her expression never changed. That's how invisible he really was. Inside the aircraft, the glow of soft overhead lights wrapped first class in a quiet reverence. Polished leather seats, champagne glasses already half full, laptop screens flickering with presentations no one would ever finish. And there, in seat 3A, Harrison Ford looked up from his folded newspaper. He saw the man in the hoodie. Saw the book, saw the way no one else saw him. Ford didn't speak, he didn't move, he just watched. Eyes narrowing, not in judgment but recognition, not of the man's identity but of the way he carried himself. The upright spine, the measured gait, the silence. He'd seen it before. Back in '64, in a roadside diner outside Topeka, he'd seen a man just like this one turned away from a booth because the waitress said she was closing, then served 3 others after him. Harrison had said nothing back then. He remembered that silence more than any movie role he ever played. The man in the hoodie passed by row 2. No one looked up. A man in a charcoal suit glanced at the sneakers, then away. In row 1A, the seat sat empty, waiting. As the man stopped beside it, pulling his boarding pass from his pocket, a faint wrinkle formed between the eyes of the flight attendant near the galley, but she didn't speak. Not yet. Harrison Ford unfolded his newspaper again, but he wasn't reading. He was listening to the subtle shifts in posture, the hushed tones just beneath the hum of cabin air. Something was happening, not loud, not sudden, but the kind of shift you felt in your chest before you understood it in your mind. The man in the hoodie placed his book on the seat, smoothing the page, as if marking a place in a story too familiar to forget. Harrison glanced again. Not at the book, at the hands. Then, for just a moment, his gaze rose to the man's face. It was Denzel Washington, and nobody knew, not yet. The hum of first class was its own kind of silence, controlled, contained. A quiet lull broken only by the soft clink of champagne flutes and the dull tap of fingernails on touchscreens. Overhead, lights bathed the cabin in a glow that made everyone feel important, nothing out of place, until something was. Cara Simmons stepped forward from the galley, posture perfect, blonde bun tight as a screw. Her uniform pressed to perfection, crimson lipstick set like armor. She moved with the grace of a seasoned performer, every click of her heels rehearsed, every smile sharpened. And she was smiling now, at him. "Excuse me, sir," she said, voice like velvet draped over steel. "Can I help you?" The man in the hoodie turned, calm, the spine of Invisible Man still visible in the seat pocket behind him. He offered his boarding pass with quiet precision, not defensive, not eager, just sure. Cara took it with 2 fingers, like it might smudge her nails. She glanced down. Row 1A, her smile didn't drop, it just froze. "I see," she said. "There must be some confusion." "There isn't," the man replied, voice low, unshaken, her head tilted, polite and precise. "Sir, this cabin is for our first-class passengers." He nodded, not moving. That's why I'm here. From row 2C, a younger man in a tailored blazer leaned toward his companion and whispered, "She's just doing her job." Kara didn't hear it. She didn't have to. She'd heard it her whole career. It was her shield. "Well," she continued, "sometimes the gate prints things wrong. Perhaps you were meant to be in economy plus. I'd be happy to walk you there." The man's gaze didn't shift. "I boarded like everyone else." Kara smiled again, this time wider, eyes scanning his hoodie, his sneakers, the book, everything except his face. "In first class, sir," she said sweetly. "We do have standards, dress code, conduct, presentation." The word lingered. Presentation. Harrison Ford looked up from seat 3A, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough, just once. He'd heard that tone before, not the words, the tone, the kind that hides behind uniforms and polished shoes. The kind that cuts slower than slurs, but deeper. "I assure you," the man said, still calm, "I meet all necessary standards." Kara leaned in slightly, her voice dipped, not loud, but meant to carry. "Our guests pay a premium for a certain experience. And with all due respect, sir, your presence may not match that expectation." There it was. The man didn't flinch, didn't step back, just stood, still, steady. From somewhere near row 4, a phone screen lit up. Recording, maybe, just in case. Kara's lips curved, not into a smile, but something closer to a smirk. She gestured down the aisle. "Let's find you a seat that better fits." Ford's fingers tapped once on the armrest, a rhythm almost lost in the cabin's hush. He didn't speak, yet, but his eyes stayed on Kara now, because he remembered her, not her face, her posture, her kind. The kind that had 3 internal complaints filed under tone and treatment, the kind that smiled while closing doors, and the airline, they had logged them, flagged them, filed them, but never acted. Kara extended her arm. "Sir." And the man in the hoodie, he simply looked down at his boarding pass again, as if reading it for the first time, as if double-checking his place in a system that never wanted him to belong. Row 1A, his seat, his silence. But the cabin was listening now, whether it wanted to or not. Kara's eyes moved like a scanner, slow and deliberate, top to bottom, hoodie, jeans, worn sneakers, a paperback novel. She didn't see a man, she saw a disruption. A variable in her curated environment, something out of alignment with the champagne, the pressed suits, the expectations. She smiled again, but it was tight now, like she was stretching skin over discomfort. And still, the man didn't move. He stood calmly, almost too calmly, as if he'd been here before, as if this wasn't new, as if he knew how this part of the performance played out. He didn't answer her last sentence. He didn't have to. His stillness said everything. From seat 3A, Harrison Ford watched without blinking. His hand rested on the edge of a worn leather magazine tucked into the seat pocket. He glanced down. The title on the cover read, "A World Beyond Bias." The question mark hung in the air like fog. He didn't flip the page, he just closed it. His mind, however, turned a page all its own. Backward, Kansas, 1964, a greasy diner just off Highway 24. The night was cold. He was young, broke, still working construction jobs between carpentry gigs. He walked in with a man named Arthur, a welder with hands twice the size of his. Black, kind. They built the same staircase together that morning, shared the same thermos of burnt coffee. Arthur had never stepped foot in that diner before. Ford had watched the waitress fake a smile, then say they were out of seating. The booths were full. The counter was closed. But 5 minutes later, she served 2 white kids with high school jackets and milkshakes. He didn't say anything, not then. He just walked out with Arthur, both of them pretending not to notice. But he'd noticed, and he'd remembered, every damn second. Now, in a cabin thousands of feet above that memory, Harrison Ford saw the same scene playing again. Different setting, same script. Kara was leaning closer now. Her voice had softened into something falsely kind, but her posture said otherwise. She wasn't asking him to move. She was telling him politely. Ford's fingers drummed once on the armrest, then stopped. He glanced around the cabin. Eyes were watching, but mouth stayed shut. One man adjusted his cufflink. A woman checked her phone without really reading it. Safe distractions, safe silence. Ford adjusted slightly in his seat. His leg shifted, subtle but deliberate. His hand moved from the magazine to his thigh, settling, centering, preparing, not yet, but soon. He looked again at the man in the hoodie, still standing, still silent. Not from fear, but from choice. It wasn't the stillness of someone avoiding conflict. It was the stillness of someone who had seen it all before. Ford inhaled slowly. He wasn't going to act because of who the man was. He was going to act because of who he was. Because once, a long time ago, he didn't, and he had promised himself that silence would never be his choice again. The cabin had gone quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the charged silence of people pretending not to witness something they couldn't unsee. The man in the hoodie still stood at row 1A, boarding pass in hand, book still resting on the seat like a question no one wanted to answer. Cara Simmons stepped forward again, each click of her heel punctuated by a growing tension that wrapped around the cabin like wire. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Everything about her tone was weaponized, precise, controlled. "Sir," she said with a smile just too bright to be real, "I really must insist. This is causing a delay for our guests." She gestured vaguely toward the cabin, as if it were full of royalty waiting to be appeased. No one responded, but a few eyes darted away. One man tugged his jacket sleeve higher, pretending to check his watch. "I'm not causing trouble," the man said, his voice even, calm. "I'm standing where my seat is." Kara's nostrils flared just slightly. Her smile shifted from false patience to something sharper. She leaned in, just enough to be intimate, just enough to be overheard. "Is that body odor?" she whispered, nose crinkling. It was loud enough to reach 2 rows back. Someone chuckled, not loudly, but it was there. A teenage girl in row 5 looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed. From across the aisle, a woman with platinum earrings whispered to her seatmate, "Well, I thought I smelled something." Kara stepped back, straightened her blazer, and tilted her head. "I'm sorry," she said to no one in particular, "but we do have hygiene expectations in first class." No one laughed, not out loud, but the discomfort was starting to slide into cruelty, one smirk at a time. In seat 3A, Harrison Ford's eyes narrowed. The lines on his face, carved by decades of seeing both beauty and injustice, deepened. His knuckles tapped once against the armrest. Not yet, but almost. The man in the hoodie still hadn't moved. He looked at Kara like a man who had seen her before, not her face, her kind, 1,000 times. And always the same performance. Kara wasn't done. She leaned toward a nearby flight attendant, stage whispering with intentional volume. "He smells like poverty." This time, someone laughed out loud. A phone lifted in the back of the cabin. Then another, a screen lit up with a TikTok live stream. The caption read, "This flight attendant just said Denzel smells like poverty." And suddenly, it was no longer quiet. It was charged. A child's voice cut through the air. "Mom," said a girl in row 4, "why does she hate him?" Her mother didn't answer. The phone in the back shifted angles. Closer now, zoomed in on the man in the hoodie. Another whisper from somewhere toward the middle of the cabin. Male, uncertain. "Wait. Is that who I think it is?" From the very back, someone said it louder. "Bro, that's the guy from Glory. That's Denzel Washington." The ripple was instant. Phones rose higher. Thumbs moved faster. One comment blinked across the live stream. "Y'all really just did that to Denzel." Kara froze. For the first time, the color shifted slightly from her face. Her smile faltered, if only for a second. Then she doubled down. "I don't care who he is," she snapped. "This is first class. There are rules." But the room wasn't with her anymore. It was watching, closely. From seat 3A, Ford exhaled quietly, the kind of breath that comes before a storm. He wasn't surprised. He was disappointed. In them, in her, in the silence. He looked at the man still standing at 1A, and the man, Denzel, met his eyes. No words, just a shared understanding. This had happened before, and it would happen again, unless someone stopped it. The silence in the cabin wasn't silence anymore. It was static. It buzzed beneath every breath, every glance, every unspoken thought. Cameras were still rolling. Eyes darted between the man in the hoodie and the woman in the uniform, but no one said anything, not until he did. A voice broke through, calm, deep, measured. "Enough." It wasn't loud, but it landed like a verdict. Heads turned, slowly, almost reverently. Toward seat 3 a Harrison Ford stood, not with flair, not with urgency. He rose like a man who had been standing his whole life, who just hadn't left his feet until now. Kara turned. Her eyes flicked from the phones to him, registering the face a beat too late. "Sir," she began, voice thin. He held up one hand, not to silence her, to anchor the room. He looked past her toward the man still standing at 1A. "You saw a jacket," Ford said, his voice steady. "I saw a man." No one moved. He stepped into the aisle. His gait was slow, intentional, the way you walk through places that demand respect, not fear. "I've flown since before I had a name," he said, "since before the cameras, before the posters. I've boarded flights with calloused hands and no one to recognize me. And never once did I think dignity came with a seat number." Kara opened her mouth, but no words followed. Ford turned slightly to face the cabin. "Some of you saw what happened," he said, "and you stayed quiet. That's normal. Silence is easy. It's also expensive." A teenage boy too rose back, whispered, "Jude, Indiana Jones just stood up for Denzel." His phone was already streaming. "TikTok live," captioned, "Harrison Ford just shut the whole cabin down." The views ticked up instantly. Ford looked back to Kara. "You judged a man by what he wore, not who he was. That's your mistake. And that's the kind people remember." Kara's expression flickered, her voice strained for composure. "I was following protocol," she said. "Appearance matters in first class." Ford stepped closer, not confrontational, but unshakable. "No. Humanity matters, respect matters, and you forgot that the moment you smiled and made him small." Phones everywhere. No one was pretending not to watch anymore. Denzel stood silently at 1A, eyes still steady. He hadn't spoken. He didn't need to. Ford wasn't speaking for him. He was speaking to everyone else. "You don't have to know who someone is," Ford said, "to know they matter." He paused, then turned, slow and final, toward the man in the hoodie. "Sir," he said, nodding once, "if this airline forgets who you are, the rest of us won't." The silence that followed wasn't tense anymore. It was reverent, a stillness of recognition, of something being put back where it belonged. One screen caught the moment. Harrison's hand at his side, Denzel's book still open. The image froze, circulated. Within minutes, it was everywhere. And the caption that stuck was simple: "Indiana Jones just stood up for Malcolm X," and the world noticed. The cabin hadn't moved in nearly 20 minutes. The engines were quiet. The lights stayed dim. No crew announcements, no champagne refills, just the weight of what had unfolded, pressing down on every seat. Phones kept recording, screens glowing like a constellation of judgment. Denzel remained at 1A, book still in hand. Harrison Ford had returned to 3A, arms crossed, eyes forward. He wasn't waiting. He was done waiting. That part of his life was over. The intercom crackled once. A click, a pause, then Kara's headset buzzed. She flinched before answering. Her voice dropped low. "Flight 1790, Kara Simmons speaking." Silence on the other end. Then a breath, a name. Her face changed instantly. The color drained, her shoulders locked. She nodded once, then twice, though no one could hear what was being said. Finally, she whispered, "Yes, sir, I understand." She removed the headset. Her hands were shaking. Outside the aircraft, a black sedan pulled to a stop beneath the jetway. No press, no announcement, no red carpet. Just a man in a Navy suit stepping out with the walk of someone who had built his life managing crises too late. Joseph Varlan, CEO of the airline, he didn't come through the terminal. He came straight to the jet bridge, straight to the cabin. When he entered, the noise didn't rise. It fell. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone had seen his face during last year's holiday ads, smiling in hangars with pilots and retirees. He wasn't smiling now. He walked directly down the aisle, not a glance at passengers, not even at Ford, just forward. Toward Kara, she straightened instinctively. He stopped one step in front of her. "Kara Simmons," he said, voice flat. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of duty." She blinked, her lips parted. "Wait, I didn't know who." "You didn't need to know who he was," he cut in. "You only needed to treat him like a human being." She tried to respond, but the words didn't come fast enough. The silence swallowed her. Two uniformed airline security officers stepped forward. She stepped back, but he looked like. Her voice cracked. I mean, he didn't seem. Every word made it worse. They walked her off the plane, slowly. Phones followed her. One camera caught the moment her name badge slipped from her chest and landed face down on the carpet. When the door shut behind her, the cabin didn't cheer. It just breathed. Joseph Varlan turned around, walked slowly back to the front row. Kneeling beside seat 1A, he looked up at the man still holding his book. "I'm sorry, Mr. Washington," he said. "This should never have happened." Denzel looked up, calm as ever. "Don't make this about me," he said quietly. "Fix what made her feel safe to do it." Varlan nodded, slowly, as if the weight of the entire company had just shifted in his spine. Then he stood. The cabin stayed frozen, phones still up, unsure what came next. They didn't have to wait long. Social media had already detonated. The original TikTok, posted 15 minutes earlier, now had 3.2 million views. Hashtags exploded across platforms. They did that to Denzel trended globally in under half an hour. A civil rights attorney tweeted, "Imagine how she treats someone without a camera watching." Oprah posted just 3 words. "I've seen enough." In Sky America's corporate headquarters, chaos bloomed, emails surged, sponsors called. An entire legal department entered emergency mode. But inside Flight 1790, Denzel never moved. And neither did Ford. Reporters were already circling the terminal. One caught sight of Ford as he stepped off the jetway an hour later. "Mr. Ford," they shouted, "why did you decide to speak up?" He paused, looked at the man holding the mic, then back at the door behind him. "Because I didn't once," he said, "and I still regret it." He walked past the cameras, past the microphones, past the questions. No applause, no interview. Just a man who kept a promise he made to himself a long time ago. The cabin was still, not the awkward stillness from before. This was different, heavier, like the moment before a storm breaks or a prayer begins. No one spoke. No one moved. Denzel Washington stood from seat 1A, book still in hand, spine bent from use, not from fear. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't perform. He simply looked around. The faces staring back at him weren't filled with hatred. They were filled with something far more common. Shame, regret, the uncomfortable knowledge that silence had its own weight, and they'd each carried it far too long. "I'm not asking you to know my name," he said. His voice was steady, clear, like someone reading not from a script, but from memory. "I'm asking you to remember yours when you stayed quiet." A woman in 4D blinked. Her hand moved to her mouth. Beside her, her husband dropped his gaze. Denzel turned slowly, making eye contact not to accuse, but to remind. "I wasn't surprised by what happened," he continued. "I was disappointed. That it still happens, that it happens to people without cameras, without names, every day." No one dared lift a phone now, not to record, not to post. They were all listening, and he wasn't done. "It wasn't about a seat," he said. "It was about what you thought I didn't deserve." He paused, just long enough for the truth to settle like dust. "The next time you see it happen, anywhere, to anyone, remember this moment. Remember that you had a choice." He looked down at the book in his hands, ran a thumb along the edge. "Don't clap," he said quietly, "just listen." And then he sat, not in protest, not in triumph, just back in his seat, where he belonged. Where he'd belonged the entire time. No applause followed. Only the soft sound of someone wiping away a tear, and a breath caught in someone else's throat. In seat 3A, Harrison Ford tilted his head forward. A nod, nothing more, but it was enough. The kind of nod that said, that's what needed to be said, that's what needed to be heard. And for the first time since the plane had boarded, the cabin didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a classroom, and no one wanted to leave. The wheels touched down with a whisper. No applause, no relief, just the hush of a cabin that had witnessed something it didn't quite know how to name. The seatbelt sign dinged. Passengers moved slower than usual, their eyes lowered, their hands more deliberate. Some held their phones but didn't lift them. Others stared at the floor, as if it might reveal what kind of person they had been 30,000 feet in the air. Denzel remained seated, He waited until the last person had shuffled off, until the flight attendants, now replaced by silence and stillness, stepped aside. Then, without a word, he rose, book in hand, hoodie still zipped, shoulders square. He didn't look left or right. He didn't nod or wave. He simply walked. And the cabin, even empty, felt smaller after he passed through it. At the front of the jet bridge, the cameras were already waiting. Reporters scrambled, voices overlapping. "Mr. Washington, do you have a statement?" He didn't break stride. Behind him, Harrison Ford stepped off the plane. He walked slowly. Not because he was tired, but because he understood that some exits weren't just physical, some meant something. And this one, in its own quiet way, did. A microphone moved toward him. A young reporter leaned in. "Mr. Ford, can we ask, why did you speak up today?" He stopped just for a second, then said, "If a man needs to be recognized to be respected, we've failed. Again." He kept walking, no further questions, no elaboration. And that somehow said more than anything he could have added. Later that evening, as headlines circled the globe and hashtags burned across platforms, a high school student in Milwaukee uploaded a photo. It wasn't flashy. No filters. No edits, just Denzel walking beside Harrison Ford on the jet bridge. No security, no crowd, no spotlight. The caption underneath read, "He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The sky cracked anyway." The post went viral in 3 hours. By midnight, it was on t-shirts, murals, college dorm walls. By morning, it was framed in classrooms. And somewhere, on a quiet farm outside Jackson Hole, Harrison Ford sat with the same calm he'd carried on that flight. He didn't post about it. He didn't talk about it. He just remembered and kept his promise. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.